Welcome back to another episode of Finish the Novel, a weekly vlog where I talk about past and present issues with writing my novel, as well as a current update on the status of the book. This episode, I wanted to talk about inspiration. I think it's a really interesting topic as far as creative people are concerned, where they draw their inspiration from, what experiences they've had with their inspiration, and just how they might be able to facilitate being inspired more often. There's definitely a double-edged sword with inspiration. I mentioned this in the routine because you can feel really invigorated to create when you're inspired, but you don't want to only be creating when you're inspired because it happens not very often, right? You can't always be inspired. It's impossible. So that's just a little warning. Always be writing, always be creating, regardless of if you're inspired or not. So I've already mentioned this, but one of my sources of inspiration was The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. It's a really, really long epic fantasy series, and he actually died before the author died before he finished it. So Brandon Sanderson was brought in to write the last 3 or 4 novels. I think it was 4. And it's just a really, really great series. It's like 14 books long. It's super, super long. And it has its ups and downs. I have my reservations with it, especially the ending. I'm not like really crazy about the ending, but, it really, really inspired me, just the way that he created this entire, world with so many different cultures and so many, politicking and, the history and the lore. It was just really, really amazing for me. I really recommend that anyone interested in fantasy writing or just the fantasy genre in general read it. I think it's really, really, really well done. He did start it. Robert Jordan started the series with inspiration from Lord of the Rings. So you'll see a lot of parallels at the start of it to Lord of the Rings, but in my opinion, it kind of, especially in terms of how comparing how long it is, it really branches off into its own thing, pretty shortly after the beginning or the first couple books. So another serious source of inspiration for me was this book. I haven't read much of Joseph Campbell. I've only read this book, but I really think that it's possibly the most revelatory book on just culture and human society and stories. It's really, really something. I think that just it should be required reading. Frankly, it's just phenomenal. Anyone who wants to write basically any kind of fiction, and especially fantasy or sci-fi or anything like that, you can draw tons and tons of inspiration from Joseph Campbell's A Hero with a Thousand Faces. It's a dense read. It's not an easy read. It took me a long time to read it. I'm not going to lie. It's one of those books where you read a page and you just have to go back and read that page immediately because it's just so dense and there's so much information and revelations in those pages that in order to absorb it, you just have to reread those pages immediately after you read them. It's so easy to just get your mind blown and space out and then be like, oh my, I have to go back and read those pages immediately. So it's one of those, be warned, but it is fantastic. So definitely read it. So those are the 2 main sources that really drove me to start writing fantasy fiction. But just in general, I'm constantly inspired by just random philosophy I might be reading, or just any, at the end of every episode I talk about any games I'm playing or any books I'm reading or movies I've watched, and all those things inspire me to a certain extent and influence my work, really. They give me ideas about different story arcs I want to take or how I want to build my worlds. So yeah, all those things are good, but just one thing that really interests me randomly is philosophy. So sometimes I'll go on random deep dives in certain schools of philosophy, and then those end up influencing me. A couple of years ago, for some reason, Stoicism is becoming really popular. It's all over YouTube and stuff these days. but I just randomly got into Stoicism, and then one day I just was like reading it for like 5 hours online, just random stuff, and then that led me to Cicero's De Officiis. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it's Latin. And I read the first book of that, and it's really short. It's just like a dialogue kind of a deal. And I just loved it, and I, was super inspired. So I based this entire conversation in my book off of that. And one of my beta readers, just hearkening back to last episode, one of my beta readers said that he really, really enjoyed that part. So it worked out. So that inspiration really was good. And then lastly, something I've already mentioned, I studied history in school, so history really inspires me. Just reading history or just like catching up on, a book I've already read or something, that can really inspire me. I just think history as a discipline, it's definitely my favorite, but it's just really fascinating how through the ages you can have very similar stories and very similar patterns, and all those just kind of form to show us, to like explain to us how society came to this point. And I just find that so like mind-boggling. So every time that, I find out like new pieces of history that help inform my worldview, like I love that. So that really, really inspires me. And that's kind of what I hope to do with my fantasy book and series, is kind of mirror that same feeling that I get. Like that's kind of the general theme of the feeling I'm going for with my novel, is kind of showing that evolution of society and then imparting that feeling onto the reader of like, oh, so this is why this is like that, or this is why this happened, stuff like that. And hopefully that'll lead them to be more curious about our own world. But that's just kind of me rambling. But as for my book, let's do a quick update. Did not get as much written. I did have quite a bit of downtime this week. End of the month, I kind of ran out of hours with work. So I did have like one day where I really sat down and was able to get some good content written. Just about 3 pages on this new section. I'm a little worried that my mindset with writing this first section, I'm kind of putting a lot of pressure on myself. I'm really trying to get it perfect, and that's just not really the point that I'm going, like the goal right now is to just get it written, and then I can come back and flesh out the details that I think are important. So from now on, I'm going to try and approach writing like that, starting new sections and ending new sections, like kind of giving up on the pressure and just focusing on finishing it. So hopefully start getting a little bit more written, or even not just so much more written as just progressing the plot faster. And then something that is very apt for this episode, let me just update you on what I've been watching, because I have been inspired recently by a couple works. I started watching Hulu's Shogun show, and that is like an amazing show. The only 2 episodes are out, and I just devoured those 2 episodes, and I love them. Actually, the mall in my series are based on Japanese and Roman empires, kind of like a mix of them. And I find those empires really, really interesting. So the fact that this one is like 1600s Japan, the show, was just right up my alley. So I'm really into it. And I hope that it kind of inspires me to do some more reading on Japanese history, because that is kind of a blind spot. I know a little bit, but I obviously don't know a whole lot. So that's something that I think I could use to inspire more writing. Second, I just watched Dune Part 2, the movie. It came out this Friday. I went and saw it and absolutely loved it. I think Dune really is kind of put on a pedestal for sci-fi as like one of the major works. And I haven't read the series. I haven't read Dune at all. I watched the first 2 movies, and these are really making me want to go and read them. I just think that the story in the movie so far is extremely original, and even by today's standards, it's just extremely difficult to see where the story's going and how the plot's developing, and the characters' motivations just seem really, really good. So I think that is definitely cementing Dune on my list of future reads. But that is it for this one. Thank you everyone for coming and watching. It really, really means a lot to me. I'm extremely grateful. Please leave a comment if you have any questions or want to just, put a note on anything I said. I will read it and I'll respond to it. And have a great week. Thank you. Bye.